Hello, and thanks for joining us for the Farming Today podcast. I'm Kaz Graham, and in this episode, what future for the family farm?
So I expect this is the beginning of a period of restructuring. In the future, we will see fewer farms.
We will hear more from that expert's view a little later in the programme. First though, mushrooms. I love them. My kids hate them. Last year, UK farmers grew £133 million worth of them. And all this week on the programme, we're going to be exploring the world of mushroom growing, starting today in Northern Ireland. The McArdles, who farm in Armagh, diversified into growing mushrooms in the late 1970s. They're now a major producer of organic mushrooms for the UK market. They grow all year round on a number of sites in large padded and insulated polytunnels with controlled atmospheres, each tunnel in a different stage of the growing cycle, so there are always some ripe and ready for the shops, as Helen Mark discovered with John McArdle.
We produce about 20 tonnes of mushrooms a week. This stage here is at the very early stages of the growing process. The compost, the raw materials are got together. They'll be added into a pasteurisation tunnel to kill any diseases that are in the substrate. That takes about a week, and then after that the spawn is introduced into the compost, and that spawn holds the mycelium, and the mycelium then grows from there. And that takes about a fortnight. There's about 25 centimetres of compost and then about 5 centimetres of peat on top of that. So what we're trying to do here is we're trying to control the compost temperature, the humidity as high as possible and the CO2 as high as possible, and that'll then shock it to try and get the mushrooms to form, and that's replicating the movement from summer to autumn.
So I'm stepping into one of the polytunnels where the mushrooms are growing, a wave of heat, that humidity. There are thousands of them. It's like a pebbled path, pure white against the black substrate. It is really striking.
We work on a 6-week cycle from we fill the house and we put the substrate on and the peat layer on, then about between 15 and 17 days, depending on whether it's a chestnut mushroom or a white mushroom, then we'll start with getting mushrooms ready for picking. That picking process lasts about 5 days. That first crop is our first flush. There'll be a couple of days and then we'll get another crop. Hopefully, if there's no disease in the house, then we will go for a third flush, and then day 38, 39, then we'll be looking to empty this house here. The house will be steamed out to kill any diseases and refill the house again before day 42, That spent substrate, it'll be winched out into trailers and they'll go on to farmers, and especially the organic farmers, because they don't have any fertiliser, so it's quite useful for them. Mushrooms really is a circular economy. We're taking a waste material in the straw, we're taking a waste material in the chicken litter, we're adding gypsum, water, and we're producing a crop of mushrooms of it, and then it's going back onto the field again.
Why do you have to use peat?
The peat is for water retention. Mushroom is, the majority of it is made of water, so we need the water retention right through it, right from the compost right through to the peat. Now, there are substitutes for peat that are coming onto market. We welcome that there, but they do come at an extra cost. So it is, and it's whether the consumers are willing to pay that extra cost to get rid of the peat. The legislation is going to come in at some stage over the years, but it needs to make sure that it not only applies to us, but it applies to mushrooms that come from the continent and come from Ireland, it comes to the EU. Mushroom doubles the size in 24 hours. Whenever the mushroom's ready to pick, we have to pick it. We can't wait till the next day to get it picked.
By hand, mushroom by mushroom. That's quite intensive work.
Yeah, it's very labour intensive. Like labour costs about 40%. It's a huge cost for us. From Brexit hit, there's been a labour shortage in us. So, a lot of the workers would have been Eastern European workers. That slowly but surely has decreased, and now we rely heavily on the government's seasonal worker scheme. But it's only for a 6 month period, even though we produce every single day in the year, whereas the guys in the south, which some of our growers in the north are only a mile from the border, he can avail of a 5-year visa. We estimate the cost factor to train somebody up, paying for their flights, paying for their accommodation, can be £8,000 per worker. Do that once over a 5-year period compared to having to do it every 6 months. It's quite tricky, and you need very good dexterity, but you also need very good decision making. And there's an act of twisting and turning them and picking them up. Experienced workers will pick 3 and 4 mushrooms at a time, and then they'll cut the stalk just above the peat line. The waste goes into the bucket, and the mushroom can go into the punnet.
And where do your mushrooms go?
95% of our mushrooms go to the UK mainland. There's only 3 organic mushroom growers across the whole of the UK. Another guy 5 miles down the road is the other organic grower in Northern Ireland. Between the two of us, we do about 65% of organic mushrooms in the UK.
John McArdle in County Armagh. Now, I'm not sure exactly how much mushrooms cost at the moment, but a quick glance at the receipt from the big weekly shop in the supermarket is a regular reminder that inflation is running high, well above the Bank of England's 2% target. And as prices stay high for us, so they do for farmers. Fertiliser prices are up by more than 10%, and most, though not all, farming costs are continuing to creep upwards, according to an agricultural inflation index, looking at prices from September 2024 to September 2025. It's been compiled by AF, Anglia Farmers, a cooperative buying group for farmers that trades in everything from animal feed to diesel, all known as inputs. John Barrett is their Chief Agricultural Officer, and I asked him why fertiliser in particular had gone up in price.
Fortunately, it's actually gone up again this week. The price rise of fertiliser has come about from the increase in price of ammonia. So, of course, it's all imported and the ammonia production is outside of this country, and it's gone up in price. And so that's led to the price rise.
And there's also something called contract and hire that you mentioned, which is up by 6%. What exactly does that cover?
That's machinery. The hire of tractors, they've gone up in price as new tractors have gone up in value. The costs associated for the suppliers of those tractors have gone up. Labour costs, of course, and their input costs have gone up. And so that's been reflected on farm as well.
Yeah. It's not all bad news, though, is it? Some costs have been falling.
That's right. We've had a bit of deflation, particularly in crop inputs, agrochemicals. They've actually come down 11.2%. That's good news for farmers. They've needed that because obviously their output price has also come down.
And feed for livestock, that's come down as well, which presumably is good for dairy farmers who are facing a drop in the price that they're paid for milk at the moment.
That's right. Feed prices are well down, 7.4% down, and that's reflected in the price of arable crops paid to arable farmers, which is then fed to those livestock. So it's the same for dairy, for beef, for lamb and pigs and poultry. All of their feed costs have come down.
John Barrett from AF, Anglia Farmers. Now, as we've been reporting on Farming Today, many farmers are feeling extremely uncertain about their future. On last Friday's programme, we spoke to the food processor McCain about a survey of farmers they'd commissioned, which found 51% of respondents had considered quitting the industry within the last year, and 40% believe they might be forced to leave farming within the next 10 years due to economic pressures. Here's James Young, Vice President of Agriculture at McCain, Great Britain and Ireland.
We did expect that it wouldn't make good reading, but probably not such a big number in terms of leaving the industry. That's the bit that really worries us, because what will happen to that land and that food production after that happens, and the loss of all that experience and everything that's gone into that viable food production over all these years and generations.
Well, farming families often say that it's more than just a business. It's a way of life, and so not easily given up, despite the economic headwinds. Predictions of a mass exodus from farming in the wake of crises like the foot and mouth outbreak in 2001 didn't come to pass. But now the industry is faced with the reality of life after EU support payments and a struggle to stay profitable. Are family farms vulnerable to a degree that we've not seen before? It's a question I put to an expert in the dynamics of farming families, Professor Matt Lobley from Exeter University.
So I've been reflecting on this, having done quite a lot of research over the years and in the past looking at previous rounds of common agricultural policy reform, where often it looked like we were about to go over a cliff edge, and then in the end people adapted and the change wasn't so bad. But this time feels different. This time really does feel different. I think the more rapid than expected initially withdrawal of the basic payments, the sudden closure to new applicants of the SFI scheme, the fact that high-level countryside stewardship is by invitation only. So farmers are finding it really difficult to replace some of those public funds that they used to receive. Input prices have gone up, incomes are incredibly volatile, And that's before we even get into things like inheritance tax. So I think it is different this time. We might not be quite on a cliff edge, but I think things are going to change considerably.
How big an impact has that post-Brexit change to farm support had? You know, we're at a point now where the EU subsidy that farmers used to get, the basic payment system, the BPS, is all but gone.
Yeah, absolutely. It's all but gone. And last year, around 30% of farms either just about broke even or made a loss. So that's a significant proportion of our farms that are going to be really struggling financially.
We hear surveys of farmers saying that they are going to quit. Surveys in other years have also shown that people were thinking about quitting, but, you know, they didn't actually go through with it in the end.
Yeah, I mean, I've seen the recent report that said, I think it was something like 50% or over 50% of farmers had thought of quitting. That sounds like a really high number. I wouldn't expect that many to go, and I wouldn't expect them to go immediately. But I think the difference compared to the past was that in the past, people did have their basic payment that often converted a loss on the agricultural part of the business to a modest profit. They don't have that now. And so they're going to be looking for other sources of income. So I expect this is the beginning of a period of restructuring, and that in the future, we will see fewer farms.
What is special about the family farm? I mean, and if there are fewer family farms in the future, does that change or even, I don't know, perhaps threaten the fabric of rural life, rural communities? Or would that be going too far?
Well, no, I think that's one of the things. I mean, the family farm model is the dominant model for farming across the whole globe. You know, numerically, most farms are family farms of one sort or another. Some of them are very small, some of them are large. Some of them have been in the same family for generations, hundreds of years in some cases. And I don't doubt that we could produce probably the same amount of food as we already do with fewer farms. But what we don't really know is what would the impact be on rural society, on rural culture. Farmers aren't just there to run their business. They're part of their community. They play an active role often in their community. So there are probably things that minute, you know, might seem a bit intangible. Over time, we would lose if we lost large numbers of family farms. I mean, I don't want to be scaremongering about this because we've been losing farms for decades anyway, and yet we still have a farmed countryside. We still have a lot of farming traditions. But at some point, there would be a tipping point, and we don't know where that tipping point is, where, you know, when we go over that, things would look very, very different.
Professor Matt Lobley from Exeter University. And that's it from us for today. I'm Kaz Graham. The producer is Sarah Swadling, and Farming Today is a BBC Audio Bristol production.